protect clean water and stop irresponsible and reckless water pollution in so many places, and still not see that the same thing is wrong when it comes to gaseous waste being poured into the atmosphere as if that is a sewer. 98 million tons a day has added up. You know the numbers, 400 parts per million is what the scientists say. It's a little above that. Now, here's another way of thinking about it. The cumulative amount of these gases that are up there now from man-made sources now traps as much extra heat energy every single day as would be released by 400,000 Hiroshima atomic bombs exploding every 24 hours. That's an honest to goodness fact. And it's a big planet. But that's a lot of energy. And that's what's raising the temperatures, and 90% of it goes into the oceans. And when Super Typhoon Haiyan came across the Pacific Ocean and hit the Philippines, it crossed waters that were 3.5 degrees Celsius, 5 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than normal, and it became the strongest storm ever to make landfall and caused 4 million homeless refugees. It's not that easy to recover from such a blow. And here in this city, when Superstorm Sandy came across the windward areas of the Atlantic Ocean, it crossed waters that were 9 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than normal, more than 5 degrees Celsius. And so it devastated this city. And people saw what the strength and force and destructive power of these storms can be and how they're growing. And of course, the extra heat in the oceans causes them to evaporate more water vapor up into the sky, and that means the sky is much more humid, 4% more humidity, and so when the storms release the downpours, you get these enormous downpours. My hometown of Nashville, Tennessee, had what they call the once-in-a-thousand-year rainfall. Just 3 years ago, thousands of my neighbors lost their homes and businesses and didn't have any flood insurance because there's never been any floods in the memory of man in those areas. And there are places all over the world where that's happening. In Pensacola, Florida, in April, 2 feet of rain in 26 hours. That's not normal, and it's happening all over the place. And that same extra heat that causes the downpours and then the massive floods and the mudslides in many places and the disruption of agriculture, that same heat also pulls the moisture out of the soils and causes these deeper droughts. California today is 100% in drought, 58% in exceptional drought, the highest category. And all over the world you can see where these events are happening, and the farmers are worried, and they should be worried. And you see in the tropical diseases being driven, and the ice is melting and the sea level is rising, and I could go on, but those are the impacts that should awaken us to the fact that we can't wait anymore. We have got to take this under control. We are paying the cost of carbon in all these extreme weather events and the collapse of governance in many areas. You look at Syria, 2006 to 2010, worst drought in their history, climate related. 60% of their farms were destroyed, 80% of their livestock killed, 1 million refugees driven from the rural areas into Damascus and the other cities where they collided with another million refugees already there from the Iraq War. And WikiLeaks published a document where the internal Syrian ministers were saying, we can't handle this, it's going to cause an explosion. We've got to do something about it. Well, the rest is history, and there were many causes that opened the gates of hell in Syria. But when the environmentalists and when the U.S. Pentagon says, hey, wait a minute, this is going to cause crisis after crisis in places around the world, and failures of governments and chaos and millions and hundreds of millions of climate refugees, what are we waiting for? These are the kinds of consequences that should be motivating every person on earth to stand up and say, we are going to solve this crisis. back in the day when the first big clunky mobile phone handsets came out. Some of y'all are as old as I am and may remember that. Oh, I thought that thing was so cool. I've always wanted to be an early job. When I was in the Congress, I used to call up one of my buddies in the summer and say, hey, you want to have dinner? And so I got one of those things. I called him. I walked over to his house while I was talking to him. He said, yeah, come on over. When can you get here? Knock, knock, knock. He opened the door. Whoa! It was like the wild and crazy guys on the old Saturday Night Live. And I thought that thing looked so cool. I look at those pictures now and think, boy, that looks dumb. But back when those phones came out, AT&T isn't the only company, my belt. They said, hey, maybe we can sell some of those things. Let's do a study and figure out how many we might be able to sell so we can plan ahead. It's 1980. By the year 2000, the study came back, you're going to be able to sell 900,000 of those phones around the world. Oh boy. They got excited over that. 2000 came, they sold 109 million. This year there are 6.5 billion of those cell phones, and another 1.2 billion new ones sold every year. So here's my question about that technology. Why were the leading experts in the world not only wrong about how quickly that technology would develop, but way, way wrong? Why? Well, I think there's four reasons. Number one, we haven't been used to seeing what high technology can do to bring the cost down for technologies that become popular. We saw it with computer chips, and some technologies benefit from that. And when it comes down exponentially, people go, whoa, that's a surprise. Second thing, we are not used to, from the past, the cost coming down when the quality goes way up at the same time. Wow. Now these mobile phones are supercomputers. Number three, who buys them? Not bureaucracies, not utilities, not big institutions. People buy them, and they decide that they want the empowerment of these things. And number four, most important, they didn't stop to think. In the developing parts of the world where the majority of the people live, they didn't have landline telephone grids. They were ready to leapfrog to the next technology and not wait until they repeated the pattern out of the West. So it just exploded. Now here's my point. Solar photovoltaic panels have the exact same characteristics. An exponential curve starts out slow, looks like nothing's happening, looks like it's going nowhere, and then it starts to go up just a little bit, and then it shoots straight up. That has happened right now with solar energy. Do you know there are 79 countries in the world today where the cost of electricity from solar photovoltaic panels is equal to or cheaper than the cost of electricity from coal and all other sources? 79 countries. And within 6 years, as the cost continues down, the best studies show that more than 80% of the people in the entire world will live in regions where solar electricity will be equal to or cheaper than the price from other sources. What are we waiting for? We need to go in a big way to develop emission-free, green, carbon-free solar electricity. What are we waiting for? Bangladesh, one of the poorest countries in the world, is installing 2 rooftop PV panels every minute, night and day. It's taken off like a skyrocket. How much new electricity generating capacity came here in this country from coal this year? You know the answer is 0. Because it's no longer competitive and because activists have helped to shut down so many of the coal plants in the United States. Wind power, 2.5 cents per kilowatt. Way cheaper than the alternative. Okay, so the carbon polluting, big, dominant companies of the past are using their wealth and political power and connections to try to hold back Celsius and 33 degrees and 32 degrees Celsius, that's not a difference of 1 degree. It's the difference between ice and water. And in the same way, the difference between more expensive than and cheaper than is not a minor difference. It's a difference between markets that are frozen up and markets that are liquid. And as the price continues to come down, Katie, bar the door. This revolution is going to be unstoppable. And I'll tell you something that happens that convinces me that the political system can no longer stay in the way. In Atlanta, Georgia, I had some tweets back and forth today. I don't know the person, but I read an interview with her. She was one of the original founders of one of the major Tea Party groups in the United States. Very conservative Tea Party Republican. And so Georgia Power, which has a monopoly over electricity in Georgia, decided to put a tax, get the legislature, you know, they have their minions like ALEC and these groups that groom the legislators to do what the polluters want. And they got them to introduce legislation to put a tax on anybody who installs a solar panel on the roof. And this Tea Party person said, what? What? So the Atlanta Tea Party joined forces with the Sierra Club, and they created a new organization that's now what they call the Green Tea Party. I mentioned these tweets back and forth. The last tweet that she sent back my way ended with solar equals freedom. First of all, do not get discouraged. We're going to win this. The only question is how long it's going to take us to win this. Don't feel depressed. Don't feel like solving the climate crisis is this heavy burden that you've got to carry that just makes you feel depressed. I want you to feel the joy of having work to do that justifies every effort that you can expend to get it done. We are the generation of people alive today that will make a difference. We're not hearing well done. We are going to win. The great American poet in the 20th century, Wallace Stevens, once wrote a line that said, after the last note, there comes a yes. And on that yes, the future world depends. We've had a lot of no's, but a yes is coming. And you know what? Every great social movement, the abolition movement, the movement for women's equality and voting rights, the movement for civil rights, the movement to end apartheid, the movement to end the nuclear arms race, the movement for equality and freedom for the LGBT community, all of these movements faced no after no after no, but after the last no came a yes, because any question, when it is finally resolved into a binary choice between what is right and what is wrong, has a foreordained conclusion because of who we are as human beings. We are going to do what is right as soon as the choice is clear, and it is becoming clear, because Mother Nature is speaking up and saying, we've got to do it. And the technology businesses are showing us that the cost is coming down and we have the opportunity. So we have to make that choice. Now, finally, years from now, doesn't take storms and chaos, with the failure of governance and crop failures and all of the parade of horribles that the scientists have been warning us about almost at the top of their lungs, that generation would be well justified